What lessons from history can teach us about fundraising today and planning for tomorrow during the season of the novel coronavirus? Hi, I'm Bill Stanczykiewicz. This is the first day from the fundraising school. And before we move on with our content today, I do just want to call out you did not hear the opening jingle. You do not see the familiar graphics. And that is because Indiana University's social distancing policy has called for the closing of our normal recording studio. However, the fundraising school staff has come up with a novel solution of its own by using Zoom technology so that we can continue to bring you this responsive, high quality content, which today involves my colleague, Dr. Kathi Badertscher. Kathy's been with us on the podcast before. Perhaps you took our ethics and fundraising course that Kathi designed and delivered. And Kathi also leads our master's program, co-leads our doctoral program. And in addition to her expertise in ethics, also is a historian, and these lessons from history can help inform our fundraising again today and into the future. And Kathi, as we have dealt with this coronavirus, so many people have talked about the Great Influenza, the so-called Spanish flu. What happened then, and how can it inform us today?
Right. Hi, Bill, and greeting you from my office at home, as we are at quite a distance from one another. So.
Yes.
A few kind of fun facts, if there's such a thing, about the Spanish flu. So for one thing, why was it called the Spanish flu? Well, the news, because World War I was going on, right? The World War I, 1914 to 1918, and the flu peaked 1918 and 1919. So it was not exactly normal times when the flu occurred. There was a lot of censorship of news in the press, and the first news outlets that published that there might be an epidemic of flu going on were in Spain. So hence the flu pandemic became called the Spanish flu. So a few things we can learn. I wanted to tell your listeners, first of all, this social distancing and flattening the curve that none of us have ever heard before, like everything else, this is old. So let me read you something that sounds hilarious now with what we're going through right now. In 1918, the Surgeon General had the following to say: Number 1, avoid needless crowding. This is a thing from 1918, right? So they closed theaters, churches, schools. Now, people couldn't telecommute at this time, but so many of the same phenomenon, avoid needless crowding, right? So this is the very beginning of public health and our infrastructure. So we knew this all this time ago. Do not cough and sneeze out in the open, right? Cover your mouth. Wash your hands, wash your clothes, especially wash your hands before you eat. So all this is advice from more than a century ago. So I actually thought that might be a bit comforting to know that what we're being told to do now is not novel. We're not making this up. So couple things on philanthropy. So you're not going to be surprised when I tell you that informal philanthropy rose during times of crisis. And this is a flu that came in waves, which I don't think any of the experts are predicting now, because the sharing of information was a very different thing. And we had army camps and lots of reasons that the flu came and went, and that is not expected to happen this time. So in each of the waves, social service agencies, which were quite strapped for resources, did a lot of guerrilla fundraising, right? Door to door, not in crowds, not in churches or in public meetings as they might have done. But that was very definitely an important part of strategy. And agencies and volunteers did things like delivering food. We're seeing that today. Bringing people to hospitals, taking care of each other's children in communities. And since a lot of the Red Cross, which was a fairly new organization, a lot of the Red Cross infrastructure was helping war wounded, and there was not a lot of home front. What we saw were community citizens, some prominent citizens, some everyday people like me, creating like command centers in communities where people could come and get information, share supplies, share resources, and share ideas and human connections. So, so we see this very much happening today. For everyone who's hoarding something, there are more people who are sharing, collecting stories like that and asking my students to do that, because that's hopeful. And then the other
Hey,
thing
Kathi, that's a great point. If I could just interject, is it really just shows that even when the philanthropy is not formal, which is what we measure and talk about so much today, it again demonstrates that philanthropy is part of the human spirit, part of the human condition, and people will rise up in response to these crises. We saw that in 1918. We're seeing that now. And fundraisers, even if that doesn't translate to direct gifts right now, is still something we can hold on to with hope and with expectation that this is how people respond.
Absolutely. I have talked to a few of my colleagues in the last few days saying, I know there's going to be something that I'm going to be able to do to help. I'm just not sure right now what that looks like. Mm-hmm. So I think the more communication and people are really living more vicariously than ever through social media outlets, that's the most important channel that we have right now as nonprofits.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to shift gears related to the flu, but related more generally to public health, and share a bit about the early years of the Rockefeller Foundation, because that actually ties to what we're experiencing right now. The first of the Rockefeller philanthropies, and it's the first by a number of years, was the Rockefeller Institute for Medical Research. And some years later, after the National Rockefeller Foundation, chartered in New York, but with a global scope, was established, the Institute for Medical Research was subsumed into the foundation, but as a standalone foundation, operating foundation, it ran a global campaign against a number of epidemics.
Wow.
And so it was Rockefeller funded virologists who eventually came up with the first virus for the flu. It didn't happen in lightning speed like we're seeing right now. I mean, that we're already talking on day 65 of the coronavirus that there's a potential vaccine to be tested in the US. And it took more than a decade back when this flu was raging, because medical technology and research was so different than it is today. But I think, again, that's cause for hope and belief in philanthropy, because it was, this was all happening decades before we had the National Institutes of Health and a lot of significant government infrastructure. So philanthropy incubates these ideas and solutions, and 100 years later, we take them for granted. So I think it's reassuring to look back.
And Kathi, just to expand on that with a final point, again, you're so studied in history. What advice would you summarize for fundraisers today? This is not the first health crisis in world history. Certainly, sadly, won't be the last. I can predict that with unfortunate confidence. We know health pandemics on the planet in BC, thousands of years ago. This is just part of the human condition. So here we are. What advice would you have for fundraisers as you look back in the Great Influenza of 1918 and other incidents that people can utilize today?
I think the notion of who is your community is something that fundraisers are probably hyper conscious of right now. So during a lot of epidemics, public health crises, the notion of community adapts to what's going on. And I think but that's, I mean, how many times in your classes have you led with fundraising is about relationships, and
Right.
relationships, right, are between people and among communities. And that can stretch across the world. That can be on your street. That can be your social media community. I have students all over the world, and I'm trying to figure out creative ways to connect with them. And I think that that's what fundraisers are challenged to do right now. And people are starved for information during difficult times, and not fake news, and not something that they're not going to connect to, but everybody is relating in some way to being isolated from each other physically. And so how can we create community and share meaningful knowledge and stories of impact in ways that give us hope? I think that's, and as I'm thinking about my role as a volunteer fundraiser, as a board member, that's what's weighing on me now. How do I do that and do it effectively?
As shocking as it sounded when the March Madness basketball tournament was brought to an end, philanthropy does not come to an end during these times of crises.
Indeed.
And we can continue to foster our relationships,
Right.
continue to fundraise. And you can also continue your professional development with these podcasts. They're archived on our website. And our website is philanthropy.iupui.edu/the fundraising school. You'll also learn about our online classes as the fundraising school stays open for business. And Kathi, I'd like to ask you to just take a moment. One of the things, we encourage people to find opportunity during times of crises. I just wonder if more of our colleagues are thinking, it really is time for me to go get that graduate degree, that this crisis has taught me that for my job security, for my interest, seriously, right?
Yeah.
When the economy struggles a little bit, people often are thinking about maybe it's time to go back to school. And we have the online master's degree, a program that you lead. What does our audience need to know?
So we are as versatile and flexible as we can be in terms of which semester you might be interested in starting your studies. Spring, summer, fall, you can start with a single class. Check us out and see if the communities that we create virtually or on campus are what you're looking for. I talk to prospective students all the time, and a lot of the time I say, you're going to learn things. You'll have a degree, a credential, but the lifelong connections that you make, who you're in class with, and a new community, that will sustain you. And so I have found that to be true in my case, and I get to keep in touch with students who now I have known for many years. So.
This is a master's degree in philanthropic studies, the only such degree in the entire world. This in so many ways prepares you for leadership opportunities in our sector. And again, more information available online at philanthropy.iupui.edu. With Dr. Kathi Badertscher, this is Bill Stanczykiewicz, and now you are more fully up to date on this first day from the fundraising school.